If someone asked you to imagine a person with an extraordinarily high IQ, you'd probably picture a quiet genius in a lab coat, speaking in flawless sentences, never stumbling over a word. The kind of person who walks into any room and everyone just knows. Here's the uncomfortable truth. That image is almost entirely wrong. The people who actually land in the top fraction of cognitive ability don't walk around feeling brilliant. Most of them spend a ridiculous amount of time convinced they're frauds. They lie awake until 3 a.m., not because they're chasing a breakthrough, but because they're replaying something they said in 2009. They talk to themselves, they lose their keys constantly. And when you look at their psychology up close, it's far messier, far more human than anyone wants to admit. So if any of that already sounds familiar, stick around. We're going through 7 strange habits that often show up in people with very high IQs. Let's see if any of these hit home. 1. The most reliable pattern is that they doubt themselves more than almost everyone else around them. They aren't fishing for compliments, it's structural. They genuinely, deep down, believe they're less capable than they actually are. Research on self-assessment consistently shows that high performers underestimate their standing, while low performers overestimate theirs. Why? The more you truly understand a subject, the more you see its full depth, and all the ways you still fall short. Why does knowing more make you feel like you know nothing? The person who barely grasps something feels confident. The person who grasps it deeply sees the gaps they haven't filled. For high IQ individuals, this creates a quiet, persistent anxiety that they're somehow getting away with something, that everyone around them has overestimated them, and one day, someone will figure it out. The smarter they are, the more elaborate the internal case they build against themselves. That same machinery that makes them excellent at complex reasoning is equally brilliant at constructing reasons they're not good enough. It's almost funny. The person most qualified to be in the room is often the one most convinced they shouldn't be there. 2. They're disproportionately likely to be night owls. And this isn't just a preference, it seems neurological. A study in personality and individual differences found that people with higher measured intelligence consistently went to bed later and woke later, even after accounting for job schedules and social obligations. The evolutionary reasoning, overriding your natural circadian rhythm for abstract, self-chosen pursuits like reading, thinking, and creating, is a relatively new human ability, and it tends to appear more in people with higher general intelligence. In practice, this means many very smart people are chronically sleep-deprived, slightly out of sync, and navigating a world built around a morning schedule they'll never naturally fit. It often comes across as laziness, but their hardware just ticks differently. 3. They talk to themselves out loud, more than they'd admit at a dinner party. And there's solid research behind this. Private speech, talking to yourself, is well documented as a tool for cognitive self-regulation and executive function. Saying something aloud genuinely helps the brain process it differently than just thinking it. What we see in many high IQ individuals is a strong tendency to use language as a tool for thinking, not just communicating. When there's no one to talk to, the conversation still has value, so they have it anyway. The social side effect. They sometimes get caught doing it in a grocery store and have to quickly pretend they were on the phone. 4. They're significantly more prone to anxiety and rumination than the general population. Research has shown a genuine link between high verbal intelligence and elevated worry. The hypothesis, the same capacity for predictive thinking that makes someone analytically gifted, also makes them extremely good at imagining everything that could go wrong. Your brain is, among other things, a threat detection machine. A more powerful brain doesn't necessarily mean a calmer one. It can mean a faster, more thorough threat detector. If your mind runs simulations constantly, how many of them end in disaster? High IQ individuals tend to be anxious because their brains run simulations constantly, and some of those simulations are terrifying. 5. They forget things. Mundane, ordinary, embarrassing things. Where they put their keys, whether they replied to that text, the name of someone they've met 4 times. This drives the people around them crazy. It also drives them crazy. This is more an observed pattern than a hard research finding, but the most plausible cognitive explanation is prioritization. A mind heavily invested in complex, abstract thinking appears to allocate less attention to low-stakes, repetitive information. The keys always end up somewhere, so something else felt more urgent. That doesn't make it less frustrating, but it explains why someone who can mentally model a 15-step problem sometimes can't remember if they turned off the stove. 6. They tend to have a broader and more expressive vocabulary, including the parts that would make your grandmother cover her ears. A study in language sciences found that people comfortable using taboo language actually score higher on verbal intelligence tests, not lower. So the people cursing the most aren't doing it because they've run out of better words. Sometimes they're doing it because they understand language well enough to know exactly which word fits the moment, and that word happens to be a four-letter one. To them, words are tools, and a good craftsman uses whatever tool gets the job done. And finally, 7. Sensory overload. People with very high IQs are disproportionately likely to experience the world as too loud, too bright, just too much. And this isn't hypersensitivity as a character flaw. Research has found associations between high cognitive ability and heightened sensory processing sensitivity. A brain that takes in more information analytically may also literally take in more sensory input than average. Crowded restaurants become genuinely overwhelming in ways they aren't for others. Certain textures, sounds, or lighting conditions register as intrusive rather than background. The same bandwidth that processes complexity deeply also processes the environment deeply, and the environment is a lot. That's why many high IQ individuals strongly prefer controlled, quiet, low-stimulation spaces to work. Not as a personality quirk, but because their nervous systems are operating under a heavier load than most people around them realize. What all of this adds up to is a picture that looks less like a superhero and more like someone quietly exhausted by their own mind. Brilliant in ways that are real and sometimes remarkable, and also anxious, self-doubting, scattered, nocturnal. Occasionally talking to themselves in a parking garage and genuinely startled by how loud that one restaurant was. Does any of this sound like you? If you recognize yourself in this, in the doubt, the 3 a.m. wakefulness, the emotional weight of a brain that won't stop running, that recognition matters. Not because intelligence makes suffering more valid, but because many people who carry this profile spend their lives being told they have every advantage, wondering why it still feels so hard. Now you know why. If this exploration resonated, please hit like for Winds of Thought. It helps more people find ideas that make them feel a little less alone.